Hello, this is Ryan Mulvaney, and this is my vision of education. So starting out, who do you follow? The main philosopher I guess I'd go after would be John Dewey, a progressive icon of education, a lot of great ideas, of course. Summarize, really summarize, the major tenets he talks about is the importance of experience and reflection, community, democracy, and effective learning environments. My favorite part of Dewey's work is the experience and reflection, the importance of that. So there's some kids experimenting and they'll reflect. But unfortunately, that doesn't mean that Dewey is everything in my philosophy. The primary teacher in me, taught first grade for 4 years, will always quote this guy, Vygotsky, and his most famous term, usually the only thing people remember him from, unfortunately, but the zone of proximal development. So it's basically a negotiation between what a student can do and what they can't do, and where appropriate education would take place. Now the admin in me will always seek to enlarge the green area. What can I do? And eliminate the blue. What I can't do. That's not really always possible, and probably never possible. The challenge is to effectively find a way to enlarge and push out and make more effective the purple, what I can do with help. So then, of course, the green grows by itself. So, to summarize where we're at so far, reflective experimental learning that is appropriate. Not quite the silver bullet that we were always looking for, especially in education. So by thinking about how we can develop these reflective appropriate lessons, we get to the truth. Socrates used to say, I know thyself, in the dialogues from Plato. Of course, teachers should be self-reflective in their practice, but the real question is, they need to know the kids in the class. They come from varied backgrounds, varied experiences, very varied schemas, and those need to be taken into account to make it a tailored education plan for each student. Whoa, yes, lots of work. Going back to Dewey's learning environments, democracy, community, experience, reflection, all those aspects of their education, and bringing into account Vygotsky's zone of proximal development and finding what's appropriate. We take in both of these and vastly simplifying their philosophies to these two approaches. We look for the reflective opportunities, experimentation, importance of community and democracy from the Dewey side. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got was always try to incorporate a social studies lesson into every lesson that you ever give. So that kind of takes care of that when it's done appropriately from Dewey. Dewey wasn't as student-centered as most people give him credit for, though. These tenets, coupled with knowing what is right for each student, being academic, understanding their scheme and what they bring to it, understanding what's appropriate for where they're at and their potential for the curriculum from Vygotsky, leads you to a kind of synthesis of the two. So relevant lessons that are meaningful and more far-reaching than one lesson at a time. When you're thinking of the big ideas that would be in a social studies curriculum, if you're thinking of that, not just to hit the standards, but bringing in all the different academic areas, we're left with a customized, relevant, and appropriate lesson, of course, for developmentally and philosophically, if it's meaningful in the bigger picture type deal. Also, by focusing on bringing in social studies in every lesson, we cover the democracy Dewey was after and taking into account the schema of the student. This usually broadens the zone of proximal development, since background knowledge is something they are always ready to use with help, and most importantly, with support from the teacher, which sometimes they don't get, unfortunately. One word can sum this up, and that's empathy. We want kids to have meaningful community impacting or incorporating lessons, and we need to know who they are. Some students have an IEP. All students should have an individualized learning plan, or at least have some ideas in mind and be supported by the teacher.